Hello, I'm Christia Ramos, reporter for INQUIRER.net, and you're watching INQside Look. Joining us today is Chargé Vida Soraya Verzosa, a human rights lawyer currently heading the Philippine Embassy in Syria. Only 3 months into her new assignment, we are sitting down with her today to know more about the efforts and the challenges of ensuring the safety and welfare of Filipinos there. Ma'am, thank you for agreeing to do this interview with us. Welcome to INQside Look.
Thank you so much for having me, and on behalf of the Philippine Embassy in Damascus, Syria, nagpapaabot talaga kami ng pasasalamat sa lahat ng nakikinig ngayon sa INQside Look. Thank you.
Ma'am, thank you again for giving us a bit of your time. To start off po, can you give us an overview of the relationship between the Philippines and Syria, especially concerning yung labor? Can you give us a bit of a background on that po?
Yes, thank you so much, Christia. So Philippines and the Syrian Arab Republic have had a long diplomatic relationship. In fact, even during the conflict, we are one of the few embassies who have remained here. We did not close our embassy at all, and we continued operating and helping Filipinos all throughout the process of our mandatory repatriation program and those who were working here before the conflict started in 2022. So a long time ago, people really valued Syria as a receiving country for our migrant workers. However, right now, we are still not yet signatories to a bilateral labor agreement at this point in time. So prior to the 2011 labor deployment ban, the Philippines was really sending a lot of workers here. And also, we have a lot of professionals here who are Filipinos. So not just household service workers, but we have Filipinos who are part of international organizations like the United Nations, the ICRC. So we really know that there is a huge potential for better labor relations in the future. But at this point in time, starting 2011 when the deployment ban was put up, and it has still not been lifted since right now, Syria is still under alert level 4. It is considered as an ICSC or International Civil Service Classification Category E hardship post. So it's a very difficult country to work in at this point in time. For labor purposes, under the Syrian labor law, they actually do not allow foreigners to work here except female household service workers. So that is really in contravention to what Philippine law requires as to the need for Filipino workers to come to Syria. So maybe in the future we will try to negotiate a bilateral labor agreement. But for now, we really need to observe the deployment ban that is put in place.
Ma'am, I'm curious, ilan pa po yung mga Filipinos na nagstay dyan regardless or despite of yung deployment ban and yung alert level 4 nga po? Are Filipinos still there? How many of them are there? And what kind of work do they do po?
Yes. So the Filipinos here, last year during our last report to Congress, we had 975 Filipinos. But this year, based on our own Assistance to Nationals mapping and survey, I would estimate that there are now around 400 to 500 Filipinos. And of course, these 400 to 500 Filipinos also include spouses. So if you're married to a Syrian national, then of course you have a legal visa to stay here, you have an ikama. But for the others who entered illegally, then those really are subject for repatriation if they want to be repatriated. So the kind of work of the workers here, majority are household service workers, so that's the reality. But they also have professionals like sushi chefs. So we have a Filipinos in Japanese restaurants here. They really value the skills of Filipino chefs. And of course, as mentioned, we have the United Nations personnel and the ICRC employees who are Filipinos. Inside the embassy shelter, we have 22 Filipinos, including a dependent child. So we have a minor who is the son of one of the wards that we were able to release from the Damascus Immigration Detention Center.
So, for those who don't know po, you were assigned to lead the embassy back in January. Now, this was following yung Washington Post report about several Filipino trafficking victims in Syria. In that report, there were also allegations na these victims were treated poorly in the embassy shelter. Now, that's when you came in. I know the DFA launched an investigation into this shortly after the report was released. When you arrived there, what was your initial assessment of the embassy shelter?
Yes, if I may be very honest about the situation.
Mm-hmm.
When I first arrived, it was total chaos. Not so much with regard to the treatment of the wards in the embassy shelter, but the way that the former assistants to nationals team were not able to repatriate the girls due to so many situations.
Mm-hmm.
So not only was it because of problems within the embassy, but also with the way that we deal with the immigration officials, with the kind of relationships that we still had to strengthen between the Philippines and the Syrian Arab Republic. Because ultimately, it goes back to leadership and the kind of relationship that you have with your counterparts in the host government. So when I saw the wards, there was a huge clamor for them to go home. But I also saw that the allegations of maltreatment were really not true. So the house mother, the former APN team that was there, I really called for a meeting to investigate about these allegations. I also issued memoranda to explain for all of them to really elaborate why there were these complaints. And later on, of course, when I interviewed the wards themselves, they issued retraction statements. They said that they were not maltreated inside the shelter. What they were referring to actually was maltreatment on the part of the employers where they came from. They were maltreated in the hands of the recruitment agencies. So when I made my own assessment and investigation into the situation of the wards, they saw that with a change in leadership, with the change in the replacement of the former embassy personnel and the sending of the five-member augmentation team, the department was very serious about addressing these allegations. So there were certain employees that unfortunately we had to recommend that they be terminated from the embassy. So I also had to do my own recommendations to remove certain personnel. And also, with regard to the replacement of the former staff who were here, I also recommended that a fact-finding investigation be conducted by the Department of Foreign Affairs to really hold them accountable for any issues. So there were certain human trafficking complaints against some personnel, and I referred them also to the Department of Foreign Affairs for appropriate action. So I guess for me, I really thank God that it's really providential that the department was very supportive of the recommendations to really pursue human trafficking cases against the recruiters, against the employers, against those who were creating, bigger problems for these human trafficking survivors. And at the same time, regarding the situation here, so the very moment that I arrived in Syria, like 8 hours after I got off the plane, I called for a staff meeting to really implement new policies, to really tell them that we will not tolerate these kinds of allegations of maltreatment, that we really want to look into the situation of neglect that the wards experienced when they were kept here in the shelter for multiple reasons. So yes. So really, it was very difficult for me to arrive here, but at the same time, I really wanted to take on the challenge of changing the situation, really uplifting the image of the embassy here, and working with the remaining staff who were excellent at the work that they were doing, and who were not a part of the internal conflicts that they were having at the embassy when I first arrived.
Ma'am, balik ako dun sa mga na-recall or dun sa mga personnel na yun, why were they recalled? Ano yung na-establish? Bakit po yun yung naging decision?
Well, it's really the decision of the Secretary of Foreign Affairs. So he's really the best person to answer the reason behind his decision to recall. Because for me, my recommendation was really to conduct a fact-finding investigation first and foremost. So, however, the department decided that due to the urgency of the situation, the recall is a more judicious solution to this issue. But basically, there were some of them who were part of allegations of human trafficking here in Syrian courts. So when I was able to investigate and really secure the services of our Syrian retainer lawyer, we were able to get documents filed before the Syrian prosecutor's office over issues involving some of the organic personnel of the post, as well as some of the local hires who were allegedly involved.
Ano yung involvement nila in terms of, trafficking, yung mga Filipino workers? Gaano kasi sila ka-involved doon?
Well, for example, the Syrian local hire, they were saying that when I had meetings with the ministry, that some of the embassy personnel were working with the illegal recruiters, that they were actually inducing the girls to leave their employers, go to the embassy shelter, and then upon signing a waiver, they would be returned back to their employers for a sum of money. So essentially, not only were they trafficking Philippines to Syria, but they were being re-trafficked from the embassy shelter and back to the employers or to a different employer. So when I did my own investigation and when I found the documents related to the complaints in the Syrian courts, I really had to take swift action and say I will not tolerate those kind of illegal practices here in the embassy. However, for some of them, the recall was, of course, a very surprising move because it's really the department that decided that it's better to recall them back to the home office and release them with new personnel who are more experienced in handling assistance to nationals cases, and also who are able to really help in the urgent repatriation efforts of the department.
Okay. Ma'am, now in terms of policies naman po, when you first arrived there, what was your first order of business? Did Foreign Affairs Secretary Chodor Locsin Jr. have any directives, or did he give you a free rein on what needs to be done to ensure that the help that our OFWs need is given to them?
To provide a clarification as well, I first arrived here the 20th of December 2020.
Okay.
So prior to the Washington article's publication in January 25th, I was really assigned here to basically clean up the embassy. So those were really my marching orders that when I arrived, when I first bid for this post, I initially thought that I would be working under the leadership of the former CDA. However, when he was recalled on November 2020, they informed me that I would be the new CDA of this post. And the marching order to me was really prioritize the assistance to nationals cases, to really make it my number one agenda to bring home all the girls in the Philippine Embassy shelter, and to really make certain recommendations regarding the anti-human trafficking action plan that we designed for the Damascus Philippine Embassy. So we work with the Interagency Council Against Trafficking. They have a national strategic action plan as well on trafficking in persons. And so when I drafted the action plan for Damascus PE, I aligned it with the IACAT plans in terms of working with the 4 pillars of human trafficking. So the prevention pillar, the prosecution pillar, and the partnership pillar. So even before I arrived here in Syria, as early as November and December, I already organized meetings with our partners from the IACAT, such as the National Bureau of Investigation and the Human Trafficking Division. I had meetings with IACAT itself, with the executive director, together with our partner NGOs who are accredited as the NGO representatives under IACAT. And also, I even organized meetings with the Department of Social Welfare and Development, as well as the National Commission on Muslim Filipinos, to really make this a whole of government approach and really combat trafficking, not just from the perspective of the embassy, but also working with our government partners. I knew that I really had to partner with different government agencies to make the action plan a reality for the Philippines. One of the policies also that we developed was something that they referred to as the Syria model. So I'm very happy to share that this Syria model is something that I developed as part of my reentry action plan in the Australia Awards Gender Equality, Disability, and Social Inclusion mainstreaming course. So under the serial model, when we were doing our research on anti-trafficking policies, a lot of the time, some agencies focus on the protection aspect, like running the shelter, or the prevention aspect, like raising awareness. But a lot of the time, the prosecution pillar and the partnerships pillar are not pursued more aggressively. So in the serial model, I really had to propose that the prosecution pillar is something that we need to work on to really send a message to the trafficker. They will get prosecuted. If they get convicted, they will get a life imprisonment conviction penalty. So even here in the embassy, we started preparing the complaint affidavits of the Filipino Workers Resource Center wards by doing interviews with them and connecting them with lawyers from the Philippine Overseas Employment Association. So we had POEA lawyers working with us. We had the IACAT lawyers partnering with us, as well as the students from Ateneo de Naga College of Law. So we really had a lot of people stepping up and really providing free legal assistance to the wards. Whereas before, they were just focused on repatriation and just being back home in the Philippines. I thought that it would be best to look at the policy from the prosecution perspective and at the same time do a trauma-informed care approach by really addressing the level of trauma that they experience. Of course, I could not have done this without the partnerships pillar. So the partnerships that we're building really includes the work of diplomats to build strong bridges, not just with our domestic partners in the Philippines, but especially with the government of the Syrian Arab Republic. So I'm really very grateful also that I was able to build these bridges very early. Like my first few days in the embassy, I really had to set up meetings with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, with the Ministry of Justice, with the Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs, and even a representative from the Office of the Presidential Advisor with the President of the Syrian Arab Republic. So they told me that this was really a pioneering initiative because it's the first time that a new CDA is able to talk to the Minister of Labor herself and really sit down on strengthening the bilateral labor relations between Philippines and Syria. The Syria model is really a new initiative. They told me that it's the first embassy in the Philippines that, and of course here in Syria or even across the other foreign service posts and consulates that we're able to work with the prosecution pillar and later on in the aftercare pillar, if you're able to provide care for the human trafficking survivors when they arrive in the Philippines. It's really something new, and I hope that this innovation in the policy would be adopted by my other colleagues and contemporaries in other foreign service posts.
Now, can you describe to us, let's focus naman po dun sa experiences ng itong mga tinutulungan yung trafficking victims. Can you describe to us yung plight of the Filipino workers there, particularly yung mga nasa embassy shelter? Ano po yung common experiences nila na share po nila sa inyo so that those who are watching can really understand the struggles of these OFWs?
Yes, thank you for this. So it's really very unfortunate that the Filipino workers who were here in our shelter, they really suffered a classic case of human trafficking. They were recruited in the Philippines by someone through fraud, through deception. They were promised jobs in Dubai. So they were promised that they would be earning $400 and above. They were promised good working conditions. And they were, of course, very much surprised that they would go through backdoor entries. Like they would be put in a boat to Sabah, and then later on from Sabah to Colombo, Sri Lanka, and then from Sri Lanka to Dubai or Abu Dhabi, and then from Dubai to Syria. So a lot of them would be very shocked that they would end up working in Syria, whereas they were promised that their workplace would be in Dubai. A lot of them were promised other kinds of work, like being a waitress in a restaurant, being a cashier, and later on they would be so shocked that they would actually be household service workers in Syria. So the problem really starts with the recruitment side. A lot of them are promised jobs based on tourist visas. So we have certain recruiters and traffickers in the far-flung provinces who would tell them that they would be able to leave immediately, but they would do this through illegal ways, such as manufacturing fake birth certificates to change their age, make them appear that they're older, to make them go through an assumed identity, so false names in their passports. And then when their passports are issued, they would also have fake travel documents, fake contracts, fake proofs that they can travel abroad. So, of course, by the time that they reach the recruitment agencies in Syria, they would really be very shocked that they went through all that kind of fraud and deception to come here. So, um, so when they seek help from the embassy, there are a lot of them who really go through horrific accounts of abuse and maltreatment. So let me tell you the story of Lara. So that's not her real name, but let's use an alias for her. So Lara really makes me very emotional because when she first arrived at the embassy shelter, she was really treated like an animal. She was chained by her employer. She was kept for 7 years in the toilet or the hammam. They would punch her so hard that her teeth would be knocked out. That the employer would throw the urine of the baby that she's taking care of. That they would really not just physically maltreat her, but also verbally. They would refuse to let her contact her family. So her family thought that not having access to her. And she was not paid her salaries during that period in time. So now the story of Lara is a very extreme example. Like she was able to escape from her employer, and then there was a Syrian family that took pity on her, and they were able to bring her to the Philippine Embassy where she took shelter. They gave her medical treatment. This was prior to my arrival, and they also said that they elevated her case to the criminal courts here in Syria. So the other OFWs, while they may not have that kind of horrific situation as Lara, some of them also suffered a lot of maltreatment. So their employers would slap them, would shout at them. They were not being fed properly. A lot of them would work more than 18 hours a day, and especially during the season of Ramadan, where it's fasting season for the Syrians. But behind the scenes, the Filipinos are still the ones working and preparing for the family iftar dinner, where a lot of guests would come, and they're really overworked, they're really underpaid, and ultimately it's a contract violation. They're made to sign contracts in Arabic, a language that they do not understand, and really these are the same things that are also prohibited in the human trafficking law of Syria, the legislative decree number 3, series of 2010. So I say this, I mean no disrespect to the citizens of the Syrian Arab Republic, but just the reality that the workers go through if they come here illegally to a country where perhaps the culture is very different from us.
Now this trafficking issue was particularly in Syria was the subject of concern in a recent hearing led by Senator Risa Hontiveros. Senator Hontiveros looked into an alleged scheme within the Bureau of Immigration. Ito pong outbound pastillas. Several trafficking victims came forward and they testified na there are immigration officers allegedly receiving from recruiters. 50,000 for each trafficked Filipino. Kumbaga to ensure daw po na smooth yung paglabas nila sa bansa. Now, what do you make of this alleged scheme na this possibility na our own immigration officers are helping, recruiters traffic Filipinos? How does this affect efforts to ensure na yung ating OFWs are safe and are out of that, sort of danger?
Actually, I agree 100% that based on the with the girls here in the shelter, that indeed there were immigration officers who were helping them leave the country. Because, Christian, some of them are illiterate. They cannot read or write. They can't even sign their names. So for some of them to be able to leave the country and get their documents processed, it was really because there were certain lanes in the immigration that they were required to go to. They were escorted by immigration officers. And a lot of them also know that the immigration officers were in contact with the receiving countries. So, for example, when they would end up in Sri Lanka or when they would end up in Dubai. Also, it's really part of a larger system. And it's really a scheme that should be ended. It should be exposed because it's very difficult for us to continue repatriating our Filipinos, providing legal assistance to them, medical assistance, livelihood assistance, if in the first place they keep coming here. So we want to really stop it at the source by really preventing them from leaving the Philippines through illegal means with the assistance of these immigration officers who were involved in the outbound pastillas. So it's very unfortunate. Again, like I don't want to generalize. Not all immigration officers are like that. There will always be bad eggs in every organization, um, and for those who are doing good, for those who are the loyal public servants who are willing to step up and speak up against these illegal practices, then I really want to encourage them to come forward and really draft complaints. So, for example, when we interview the girls for their complaint affidavits, I really ask them to state if they know the name of the immigration officer, to really elaborate on the details so that this would also assist the POEA and the Bureau of Immigration in cracking down on these officers and elevating these complaints to a proper admin case or a criminal case as may be necessary. So just to go back to the complaint affidavits, because of the serial model with our partnership with the POEA and the Bureau of Immigration and the IACAT, so all the girls that we've sent back to the Philippines have these affidavits already filed before the prosecutor's office and the trial courts. And they also have recommendations for the Bureau of Immigration officers that were mentioned in their affidavits to also be prosecuted by the Bureau of Immigration. So we really want to move forward on these cases.
Okay. Recently po, President Duterte called for a complete abolition of the KAFALA system, saying na this is unjust, exploitative. So far, several Middle Eastern countries have announced either the abolition or reforms of the system. In the case of Syria, ma'am, what's the status of this and what are we doing on our part to abolish that system? Because I understand this KAFALA system, this is what makes it hard for the DFA to repatriate yung mga OFWs kasi kailangan nila ng exit visas which can only be issued if may approval ng employers. Tama po ba? So, ano po yung ginagawa natin on our part to abolish this?
Yes, I agree with you 100% about abolishing the kafala system. It is really unjust. It's really promoting a form of modern-day slavery. So the message of the president was really very appropriate and very timely at such a time as this. So on the part of the Philippine Embassy in Damascus, Syria, that's been one of our talking points when we do our meetings with the ministry officials. So it's part of our demand when we talk to, for example, the Office of the Presidential Advisor. We provided her a briefing paper regarding ending the kafala system. We were able to also work with the Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs, the Ministry of Interior, and the Ministry of Justice, as well as, of course, the Minister of Foreign Affairs. So they said that, yes, they have the kafala system in place, but now we're also finding ways to provide exit visas to the girls, despite the kafala system, but to find an amicable solution to issue exit visas in a way that would not be onerous to the Filipinos involved. So yes, we're really pushing for ending the kafala system here. When I had a meeting with the Minister of Labor and Social Affairs herself, I really saw that she has a very positive view of improving migrant workers' rights. And she also said that Syria is a signatory to a lot of human rights treaties. It's also a United Nations member country. So I'm also pursuing strengthening the relationship with the Minister of Labor for her to also get buy-in on our proposal to end kafala system in Syria. We're pushing for this idea, but we also know that we have to respect the rule of law. We have to respect also the laws of the Syrian Arab Republic. But it's definitely under negotiations. And really, even from my very first day of arrival here in Syria, that's one of the goals that I set for the embassy to really continue pushing for ending kafala system in this country.
Ma'am, let me shift to another topic, the pandemic. What's the situation there right now, and how are the Filipinos there? What kind of assistance is the embassy extending to them?
Yeah, so with regard to the pandemic, so the embassy, when I arrived, I really made sure that we had a workplace health coordinator. And I was also very strict with them in terms of really observing health protocols. So for our kababayans who are here, a lot of them know that here in Syria, it's not as strict as the Philippines. So the restaurants are still open, offices are still open. But I always remind them that in all our activities, to continue wearing masks, to wash their hands, observe physical distancing during our activities. And for those who are suffering from the illness, so far we have only had one mortality last year. But since I assumed in 2021, so the cases so far have been mild, but they haven't been hospitalized. A lot of our kababayans here do not ask for medical assistance when they have the coronavirus. But for those who would really require medical repatriation, then the Philippine Embassy is always ready, willing, and able to fly them back home if necessary. Here in the embassy, I'm also happy to share that we only had one positive case of COVID. The rest had negative cases. And of course, that one positive case, I was the one who had the positive case. Okay, and because of this, of course, I really had to be responsible and do self quarantine. There was a Syrian pulmonologist who was checking on me the whole time that I had moderate coronavirus symptoms. And even when I was at home, I was also working and monitoring cases, still doing video conference calls to check in with them. And of course, I was still continuing the repatriation even when I was sick, but I just refused to go to the embassy shelter, so I will not infect anyone during this period when I had the coronavirus.
Okay po. For my last question to end the interview po, what can Filipinos there expect from the embassy under this new leadership, especially in terms of trafficking, because this has been a problem for decades now. So what can they expect from the embassy?
Definitely under the new leadership, I really want to assure our kababayans that we are very serious about prosecuting cases of human trafficking here, not just in the Philippines, but also here in the Syrian Arab Republic. That we hired a Syrian retainer lawyer to really go to the human trafficking department and file all the complaint affidavits. And even for those who are still with their employers who want to report cases of human trafficking, then I also want to encourage them to come forward. We will provide free legal assistance to all of you who want to draft your affidavits and who want to get them notarized by the embassy. Under this new leadership also, I want to share that the approach that we have is very different from the previous administration in terms of really providing access to justice and legal empowerment to all those who need it. And not just the legal assistance, but definitely the new embassy is also providing healthcare assistance for those who need medical repatriation. And for those who want to come home who are distressed OFWs, then they can also go to the embassy and request assistance for this, subject, of course, to existing local rules and regulations. Even despite the pandemic situation, I'm still continuing all these efforts to reach even our Filipinos in the most far-flung areas of Syria, because I want them to know that the Philippine Embassy is here, that we are ready to help every Filipino citizen who needs help, and all they need to do is really just reach out, because we are definitely open 24/7. I'm here to really provide as much help as we can, and they should not be afraid of the situation right now, because I know that there will be positive things in the days and months to come, as long as we continue working together and supporting each other.
Ma'am, thank you again for giving us a bit of your time and agreeing to do this interview. I know you're busy there in the embassy. That has been Chargé d'Affaires Vida Soraya Verzosa, and this is INQside.